This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
When you take a sip of an ice-cold Coke Zero Sugar, you know you're getting real Coca-Cola taste you love, and with zero sugar. It's so delicious, you can almost taste it with your ears. Hear those bubbles? Imagine them tingling on your tongue. Fizzy deliciousness. Listen to that cascading liquid. It's unmistakably tasty. All with zero sugar. Crisp, refreshing, and ice-cold. Coke Zero Sugar. Real Coca-Cola taste. Zero sugar.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Listening to this podcast? Smart move. Being financially savvy? Smart move. Another smart move? Having State Farm help you create a competitive price when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling. Just another way to save with the personal price plan. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
Hello, listeners. Please be advised that this episode of Wrong Station is particularly ugly, as evidenced by the fact that we're telling you in the episode it carries content warnings for body horror, body dysmorphia, self-harm, disordered eating, and grooming. Listener discretion is advised. So, please, take good care of yourself.
Oh, wonder-working power in the precious...
Incredible as they seem, are not the results of mass hysteria.
You may wish to adjust the dial you are currently tuned into.
The Wrong Station.
I have never liked my own feet. They have always been too big and too plain. Square. Inelegant. My mother and my aunts were the first to notice. Aren't they always? From the age of 9, I took pains to conceal my feet, forcing them into shoes a size too small, always refusing invitations to sleepover parties, avoiding aquatic adventures, anything where they would be revealed. I took a bartending job out of school. It was an elegant sort of place, and the female servers had to wear black dresses that hit at the mid-thigh, and below them, black heels at least 3 inches tall. I had thought flats and running shoes a size and a half too small were painful, but the agony of a 13-hour shift in heels a size and a half too small was unlike anything I'd experienced up to that point in my life. By the end of a night, my feet would be swollen, and I could only soothe myself with anti-inflammatories and long soaks in freezing water. Can I tell you something, though? I thought it was worth it. I would catch reflections of myself in the long black mirrors that served as decor in that place, and everything in my silhouette was perfectly proportioned. The pain gave me a particular kind of walk, a dainty, short-stepped walk that fit perfectly with a narrow black skirt. Something about that walk drew attention. I earned tips. I noticed that I caught the eyes of male customers, and sometimes women, too, in those long black mirrors of the night. I caught my own eye. Gone the plain, square-footed girl of my youth. I was something different now. folklore creature, temptress. There are so many in world mythology. The Swedish Huldra and Celtic Glestig, the deer woman of the indigenous Northeast and the Colombian Patasola, the Vila of the Slavs, all spirits of otherworldly beauty, long legs dwindling to the elegant point of a hoof. But dangerous, dangerous. It felt powerful to imagine myself like that. And after much experimentation, I discovered a method that helped me fit broad feet into narrow black pumps. I took cloth bandages and bound my feet up tight. The extra containment and support helped with the pain, too. At least until I unwrapped them at the end of the night, and the blood flowed back in. The pain was unbelievable. It was song. But the pain I could deal with. I became used to it. At the end of the night in my black apartment, I felt almost an anticipation when it came time to unwrap my feet. Because the rush of pain was so intense it almost felt like something else. Yet the elation of release was always tempered by horror and disgust when I saw my own feet. They had only become worse with age. By the time I was 30, they were crooked and pinched. The big toes wrenched out of alignment into swollen bunions, their vassal hammer toes bent and hunching forward. I could no longer straighten them without tremendous, agonizing effort. I went to see a podiatrist. He was blunt. I needed to stop wearing heels. I needed orthotics, and big, heavy orthotic shoes. The ones he recommended me were white. When I slipped my feet into them at the shoe store, I was suddenly 9 again. A big, plain girl with big, square feet. I didn't purchase the shoes, or return to my podiatrist. And yet, I was still 30. The things that had worked for me before no longer worked so well. I began to bind more tightly. I sought help in other places. When I typed the words foot binding into my browser, I realized I'd stumbled across a practice others had invented before. I scrolled entranced through sepia photographs of 19th century beauties. The Lotus foot, they called it. I scrolled through woodcuts and textile portraits of Song and Ming-era courtesans. But not just courtesans. By the 16th century, it was girls of all station. Their little feet bound up in clean white cloth from as young as 5 or 6 years old, to force the toes beneath and force the arch up high, so that the whole foot was small and pointed, elegant as a lotus bud. I found communities online, in the blank white and sepia backgrounds of an earlier era of the internet. I scrolled through photographs of the beautiful silk and bamboo lotus shoes that would transform the tormented foot into an elegant hoof. Entranced, entranced. I found a vendor online. Maybe the shoes they were selling were genuine, and maybe they weren't. But I spent 6 months of my salary on a pair, and waited 8 long, long weeks for them to reach my door. The anticipation was like physical pain. When they came in a brutal square brown box, I almost wept at the anticlimax. But then I cut the husk away and revealed a small, clean red case ensconced in pearls of foam. Within, lotus pods, lotus petals. That's exactly what they were like. These little silk slippers that fit so neatly in my palm. These shoes were of the golden lotus type, which was the smallest and most desirable of all. Only a foot 3 inches long would fit inside them. In the darkness of my 4 a.m. apartment, I tried to slip my own tormented foot into one, and only the point, the bent and curled toes would fit. It was shocking to me to view my own huge, hideous, and unrefined foot in comparison to the elegant smallness of that shoe. It almost destroyed me. I lay awake for the rest of the night weeping, with my arms wrapped tight around my midriff. Then, the next morning, I dried my tears and prepared a plan of action. That day, I started to bind more tightly, making sure to force the toes beneath. I was using over-the-counter painkillers almost constantly by now. They wreaked havoc on my digestion, but as I became smaller, I reasoned the weight on my feet would be less, and I could bind even more aggressively. The huldra, the glastig. Sometimes the folklore has them empty from behind. I was making myself empty as well. By now, I was down to size 6 shoes. The first time I ever spoke about any of this with someone else was at the end of a shift after closing. I had a coworker, Ashra. She was much younger and one of the smallest people I'd ever seen. In the change room at the Black Glass restaurant at 3 a.m., we were the only ones left. I had already changed out of the skin-tight black top and narrow dress into a cotton t-shirt and gray cardigan and jeans. I always made sure to change before or after my coworkers, so they would never see that brief moment when my feet were out of my shoes. That night, I had gone first and was scrolling through my phone when Ashra came in and removed her heels with a sigh. "Could you pass me my shoes?" They were tucked under the bench beneath me, and when I dug them out, I marveled at their smallness. Hot pink running shoes, barely larger than the Lotus slippers I had bought. These must be the smallest shoes I've ever seen. It was only stretching the truth a little. Yeah, she blushed, knowing surely the value of what she had. I have to shop in the children's department. I'm a bit jealous, I confessed. I've always had big feet. Really? She frowned. What size do you wear? A 6, I said proudly. But that's not big at all. It made me feel good to hear that. I stepped forward off the bench so that I was kneeling on the mat in front of her. May I? I held out the shoe and reached for her foot. She was uncomfortable, but decided to humor me. Her foot in its white sock fit neatly in my hand. She shifted a little as I closed my fingers. In Ming China, I said, your mother would have wrapped your feet in white cloth from a young age, when the bones were still soft. Your feet would have become what they called golden lotuses, no more than 3 inches long. I slid her foot into the shoe. You'd have been the most prized of beauties. She was looking down at me, vulnerable and confused. That's really interesting, she said. There was an opportunity here. I could tell I almost had her in my power. I whispered, I could show you how it's done. But I'd been too eager, moved too fast. She pulled away and scrambled to her feet. No thank you. She backed to the door. I have to go. And after that, she fled. I stayed there on one knee for some time after she was gone. I smelled the palm of my hand. I was angry with her for not understanding the true value of her gifts. But it was her loss, wasn't it? I decided that it didn't matter that I lacked her advantages. I would take by effort what had been given her by fate. How to speak about what came next. When you work in the restaurant industry, it's not too difficult to get your hands on recreational drugs, even opioids. In my case, I had a friend whose mother was a doctor, and who passed on to him the information of people who'd recently undergone surgery. He bought their unused medications off them and sold them on. And so the pills I took, on the night in question, were of medical caliber. I had them already, of course. I'd been toying with the notion for some time. But it was my angry determination after the encounter with Ashra that finally drove me to take them. When I got home to my black apartment that night in the black hour, I folded up a brown bath towel and laid it on the floor of the shower. Then I went into the kitchen and poured a large drink of bourbon over ice. I drank that down and poured another, then stood by the window looking down while I waited for 3 bitter pills to dissolve beneath my tongue. Beyond black glass, the city bright, the women in their heels far below, clicking to and from the clubs on King Street. From here you couldn't even see their feet. Vila. I drank the second bourbon, poured a third, and then went into the bathroom with the sleek steel hammer I'd bought for the occasion. I put the drink beside me as I sat on the edge of the tub, placing both my feet on the brown towel. Then, I raised the hammer up. When it fell, the pain was so intense, it almost felt like something else. Well, recovery was difficult. I didn't leave my home for 3 weeks. At night, I lay awake, feeling every throb of blood through broken arches as the shattered bones reknit. I didn't need a cast or boot, of course. I had something better. My own long-hone technique. I bound them tight. It was agony, but I was used to agony by now. I waited. I ordered what I need through delivery. I had friends from the restaurant, not Ashra, deliver me my meds. I took a lot of meds in that time, but I wasn't worried about reliance on them. I knew that once the initial healing was done, I wouldn't need them any longer. I would have something better. At the beginning of the 4th week, I took a pair of shoes down from the shelf. They were Lotus shoes, silver Lotus, for a foot less than 6 inches long. I slid my bound foot in, and it was perfect. Now, I was a butterfly. When I returned to work, I was wearing black high heels purchased from the children's department. Ashra wouldn't meet my eyes. Envy or ignorant rejection. I didn't care. When I rode the subway to and from work, I wore the Lotus shoes and waited for people to notice. I would meet the looks of wonder with a quiet, self-assured smile. From time to time, certain women, especially Asian ones, would look at me with horror or revulsion, even rage. But I would meet their gazes with a cool condescension. Once, an older woman even looked at me with pity. I could have slaughtered her. The fury that blew up inside me was so powerful I had to step off the train and wait on arching feet for the next one. Otherwise, I would have beat her senseless. The attention from men was different. Special. Some were surprised when they noticed my feet, and yes, maybe discomfited. They quickly looked away, not knowing what to make of the creature who sat across from them. But after that, some of them would redden and glance back with their nostrils flared. Once, late at night, I sat across from a young man. I could tell he was newly arrived in the city, probably rooming with other young men in a basement flat and making ends meet with gig work. $2 an hour in the cold. He was very young, too inexperienced not to stare at my feet, until I rose at St. Andrew Station and walked with minuscule steps to the door. Then I looked back at him. To his surprise, I held out my hand. He rose slowly, like the son of an honest woodcutter, reaching slowly toward an apparition in the forest. A few late riders of the train looked on, their eyes dead, or curious, or wild and aflame with jealous lust. Then the doors were closed, and the young man's hand in mine, and we were walking quickly to my apartment, saying nothing, and his breath was quick and heavy. Then we were in the elevator, and the gold and fuchsia of my Lotus shoes reflected in the dull metal elevator doors. He tried to say something. I smiled and said nothing. Then the doors opened, and I brought him into the darkness of my apartment, the black glass windows staring onto night. I will draw a veil across what happened next. I know you're imagining already. No need to be shy. No need to deny. I'll tell you only this. There is a certain phenomenon I had come across in my reading, that the musty sweetness of the bound foot smell, though partially deodorized with alum powder, was something certain people, certain men, found potently erotic, to the point of absolute abandonment. I'll tell you this. On the night in question, I proved that to myself when, at the pinnacle of desire, I allowed him to finally remove the Lotus shoe and unwrap my feet. Was it the sight or the smell? The pungent sweetness or the sight of the big toe, single, hoof-like digit with the others tortured underneath? He was destroyed, completely in my power, and I luxuriated in his slavery. Moments later, he fled to the bathroom and was sick. Then he crept out, red-faced and ashamed, and I spread myself out laughing in the sheets. I had undone him, powerful and beautiful. I had discovered myself, and now I wanted more. I began to bind myself more tightly. By this point, it was too painful to work at the bar, but I'd found a new niche for myself, an audience online who could only be satisfied by what I had to offer. I began to stream from my apartment in the black hours of the night, when the mirrors and windows were all black glass. The moment of revelation and release. I came to live for that. The kinds of people in my audience were not all you might expect. They were not all men, of course. Among the many names of my subscribers, I found one that I thought I recognized. A certain younger woman that I used to work with. Desire or morbid curiosity? I didn't care. They all bind up together in the end. Suddenly, I had more money than I'd ever seen. Suddenly, I didn't need to leave the apartment. I was taken care of, treasured. I was so many people's filthy secret. But when I looked at my feet unwrapped in the cold, gray light of afternoon, I knew that I was still unsafe. My feet, no longer square, were still unconscionably large. Silver Lotus. It would only be so long before somebody else appeared on the scene. Some girl with children's shoes who could undertake the same stringent measures as I, but achieve a more perfect result. A golden Lotus. Golden Lotus. Then I would be nothing. Then I would be lost. My only advantage was this: a willingness to be extreme. More extreme than any other. More willing to do the things that must be done. So when I had enough saved to live on for a while, I did the necessary thing. I numbed myself with vodka and withdrew the brown towel from its place of honor in the closet by the door. Then I sat once more on the edges of the bathtub and took a file to my feet for 20 minutes. The flesh came away in a red paste, soon turning pink as a whiteness of powdered bone added itself to the slurry. The brown towel turned black as I set it down beneath my feet. Then, smiling at the dim reflection in my glassy bathroom tile, I lifted up the slim metal hammer once again. Beauty is pain, as they say. I wrapped my new feet tightly as I could, layer after layer until the blood stopped seeping through. Then I measured. Taking into account an inch of swaddling gauze, I estimated 2 inches 7/8. A golden lotus. Better than a golden lotus. What color came past gold? I had reached the pinnacle at last. And this second time, the recovery was easy. Easy compared with the first. After about 2 days, I felt no pain at all. I wasn't concerned about infection because of the amount of alum salt I'd bound around the injured feet. Everything was cool and numb and dry and small. The recovery was faster now. I had complete mastery over my body, at last. I started going out again, and for the first time in many years, my feet didn't hurt. I was so confident. I exuded. All the late nights on those subway trains, I saw men's heads turn in the black glass around my reflection. This time, I offered no hands. I waited for a suitor bold enough. Finally, one came. He was young also. An engineering student, maybe from Burlington or Pickering or somewhere further out. He was drunk, swaying slightly more than the subway itself. He was watching me from down the car, whispering about me to a handful of his friends. His eyes kept sliding down to the little hoofs which stuck out from beneath my silken dress. One of his friends tried to grab his arm, but he shrugged the offending hand away and came down toward me. Something in him knew what I was looking for. He wasn't demure like the first young man. He was boorish and crude. I only smiled up at him, and when my stop came, I stood and went past him with mincing steps toward the door. He followed without needing to be asked, and a few of his friends whooped and hooted in the train behind him, while 1 or 2 of the other friends only stared at us, expressionless. "Are you going to let me see them?" His ale-sour breath slurring in my ear as we rode the elevator up together. "Maybe I'll let you do more than that," I told him. "If you're good." Then he was like a baiting dog at heel beside its master's knee. Desperate, violent, but fully in its master's hand. When I brought him into my apartment, he was inexperienced, but eager. He was rough. I let him remove everything but the Lotus shoes. When he tried to remove them, I was so rough back to him that he looked up at me with sudden surprise and fear. But he had gotten close enough to smell them through the bindings and the silk. The particular musty smell of the curled-up feet, deodorized with alum salt. The smell sent him wild. I closed my eyes. He was a storm, and I light and hollow. I was flying. When at last the moment came, he pulled back and demanded I unwrap, demanded to see. I slid off the Lotus shoes at last. Then, with a gesture I had practiced in the mirror many times, I loosened the bindings of my feet and offered him the endings of the cloth. "Pull," I told him. I could hear the huskiness of my own voice. I hadn't seen them since I'd achieved the Golden Lotus, these final versions of my feet. I was as desperate to see them as he was. I was on the brink. He took hold of the endings of the cloth. For a moment, neither of us breathed. Then he pulled. My feet both came away. The sound was like a dry branch breaking. There was powder and a dry, stale smell, and we both climaxed even as the horror of the moment hit us. They were dry relics in their ceremonial bindings on the bedsheets. They lay there fully still as I tried to move them. Why couldn't I move my feet? My suitor shrieked. He fell back against the dresser, cracking glass on the framed sepia photographs of beauties of the 1900s. Then he was gone, snatching up what clothes he could, reeking of the dust that still clung to beads of moisture on his belly and thighs. I often wonder what became of him, if he does what he can to forget that night, or if, like me, he sometimes thinks back to it in moments of desperate lust. I lay there for a while in the damp sheets, still trying to get my snapped-off feet to move. Finally, not knowing what else to do, I called myself an ambulance. The terms the paramedics used were auto-amputation and dry gangrene. The term the doctors used was coagulative necrosis due to critical limb ischemia. They were all extremely sorrowful and tender with me. They were certain I was a victim. A social worker came to visit during my hospital stay. She was a sturdy woman, middle-aged. She had kindly eyes. She wanted to know who had done this to me. I don't have to talk to you, I told her. I don't have to tell you anything. Of course you don't. She was so gentle with me. It made me sick. You're in control over everything you tell me, but I'm here to help you with anything you want help with. I've spent my whole career helping women. That's all I care about. I rolled over in bed. All right, she said at last. I'm leaving you my card. It's here on the table. Please call me anytime you want to talk. She went to the door. Over my shoulder, I said to her, "Do you know the one thing I regret?" She stopped at the threshold and looked back. "No, dear," she told me. "What do you regret?" "That I don't have a daughter I can do this to." That shocked her. I looked up just in time to see the look of horror and sadness on her face. Then she was gone, and I was left victorious. I have a scooter now. I ride around the city night and day, wearing little Lotus shoes that I made for myself. They're 1 5/8 inches long and made of sheer translucent muslin, so you can faintly see the black suggestion of the nubs beneath. The black lotuses. People often stare at me. They want me, even if they think themselves disgusted. But I drink it in. Now and then I find a candidate, like you, riding on the subway late at night, not knowing that they're looking for a creature out of myth. My following online is growing. Many girls, and now the odd young man, are reaching out for tips, and I am only far too glad to guide them and correct them. I'm not afraid any longer that someone will replace me. If any follow where I've led, I'll welcome them with open arms. I'll tell you something. I'm happier now than I have ever been.
The Wrong Station is made possible with the generous support of our listeners on Patreon. Join us today at patreon.com/thewrongstation for bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes content, ad-free listening, and additional goodies celebrating our decade of dread. This week's episode, Black Lotus, was written by Alexander Saxton and performed by Abigail Turner. Thank you to TCW, Jason Ewing, Layla Diaz, Firegator, Rook, Robin James, Espiliter92, and Brother Faust for helping us keep the lights, well, off. The Wrong Station is co-produced by Alexander Saxton, Anthony Botello, and Jacob Duarte Spiel, with music composed and performed by Alon Citrin, and arranged for the viola and performed by Viola Schmidt. You can follow us on social media at The Wrong Station, or email us at thewrongstation@gmail.com. And until next time, thank you for listening.